There you go. Okay, well, we've got a crazy bunch of stuff to talk about tonight, so I think my brain's a little bit scrambled with everything's been going on, so we'll just have to see how I can get through this. First of all, we're just going to start with some really great news. And that is on Monday, Judge Navarro dismissed the case against Cliven Bundy, Ammon Bundy, Ryan Bundy, and Rain Payne, stating that the court they violated justice. Let's face it, they just absolutely violated justice. The case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning that the government cannot retry these defendants. I mean, this is just incredible. This is so good. So I don't know if any of you, this is Ammon Bundy speaking to the reporters, and his brother Ryan to his left. And I don't know if any of you have wondered why the left side of Ryan's face droops. I did, so I looked it up. And his head was run over by a car when he was 7 years old. And there was a bone splinter that damaged nerves and caused this paralysis on that side of his face. So just so you all know that, and I just think great news on behalf of the people against a very overreaching, bullying government agency. It really, I mean, you're just going, wow, if she doesn't dismiss this with prejudice, there's something wrong with her. But it was just so good to have that happen. So we did, Trump did get a tax bill passed. I'm not going to call it his, as it certainly didn't do everything that he wanted. But with this group, I guess it can be called a victory for Trump, and it gives the Democrats something more to lie about, and that's what they like doing. As you've heard, this is not good for the everyday Americans. It's just a terrible thing. And yet 50% of Americans are listening to that kind of rhetoric, and they really believe that it's not going to do anything for them. The truth is 90% of middle-class families will get a tax break. And here's some examples provided by the Tax Institute of H&R Block. Brian Stando was nice enough to leave this lying around our house, so I appropriated it. And so their first example was a family of 4 in California, earning both parents working, so 2 kids, 2 parents, earning $150,000 will save $3,559 on their 2018 taxes. Family of 3 in Missouri, earning $45,000, saves $1,802. Well, people are saying, well, they didn't save much. $45,000 is 3 times less than $150,000. 1 less dependent, and they're still saving more than half of what the California couples are saving. So, you got to add some sense into all of this stuff when you're looking at it. Single person in New York earning $120,000 is saving $101. And a single person in New York earning $500,000 pays $6,500 more. So when you're saying that it's benefiting the wealthy and it's hurting the middle class, you really need to be looking at the numbers and understanding what in the heck's really going on. So on this GOP tax bill, there are losers and there's winners, other than the middle class, which I do consider to be winners. But we're going to have to see how all of this, really does play out. Some are predicting that healthcare insurers and providers are going to be losers because they're going to be hurt because the bill repealed the mandate. Therefore, people that were young and healthy and aren't going to be penalized for being forced to buy insurance aren't going to be buying it, which doesn't spread money around for people that aren't going to be using insurance services. And so that's going to mean that there's going to be it's going to be not as many healthy people sharing the costs, and that's going to cost the hospitals and that kind of thing. So we're going to have to see how that one shakes out. The doubling of the standard deduction is going to have fewer people itemizing deductions. And I think this one's sort of curious. What it really means is that prediction is that people will give less to charities because they can't deduct it. And that's always sort of puzzled me on churches, is that churches have to be 501c3s because they want their contributions to be tax deductible. Do people not feel that tithing should be tithing? And why in the hell do they expect a tax deduction? Doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, I think the other things that really stand out to us is how absolutely generous the American population is in their charitable giving. And I really think that this is just sour grapes talking as far as the charity thing. When you look at the winners here, I love this one on the employers of nonprofit entities. So think of the Red Cross and college universities and things that way. So according to an analysis of tax records for about 100,000 organizations, 2,700 employees were paid more than $1 million in 2014. Now, this was mainly at hospitals and universities, and football coaches are notoriously highly paid, as are executives with these endowments. And so when we hear that our football coach is being paid $3 million, $4 million, $6 million, $10 million, etc., and that's organization is really sort of a nonprofit, you're going, doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense to me. Well, they are going to have a 21% excise tax on those employees for the salaries over $1 million. So when you say this tax bill doesn't target the, quote, rich, there's a lot of little things in here that it does target. Winners, obviously oral exploration, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, but also expensing of equipment, being able to not having to go through those long depreciations, but being able to expense immediately is going to make a big difference, not to just oil and gas, but to many, many, many industries. It is predicted that manufacturers are going to invest more in equipment, more in improvements, because they're going to be able to deduct those costs right away rather than amortizing them. There's 3.1, this is an estimate, $1 million in money overseas that's going to come back to the U.S. Treasury. We'll see a one-time boost in taxes. Apple alone would pay about $36 billion in taxes when and if they repatriate their overseas money. So when you stop and think of that, there's a lot more money that's going to be coming into the Treasury, will offset some of these tax reductions, giving us a chance to offset them, have the economy grow, and then see where the tax revenues are. But I really do think that we're going to see it throughout the economy. And you're already seeing it with many different companies, broadcasting that they're giving bonuses, they're giving raises, they're doing this, they're doing that. It's not terrible that these companies are going to bring money back in and do stock buybacks or reward their shareholders with dividends. If the shareholders get more in dividends, where does that money go? It goes back into the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that terrible. So when we look at statewide issues, there's a super PAC called the Congressional Leadership Fund. And that's sort of the House Congressional PAC. And it's opening 8 new field offices to protect what they call endangered Republicans. This is part of a $100 million campaign to protect the Republicans' 24-seat House majority, and it's going to bring the total number of field offices to 27. We've talked previously about how the Democrats have targeted the 5th District, our district, Kathy McMorris Rogers. She's being challenged by Lisa Brown. And so one of the offices that will be opened or is opened will be in the 5th District, working to get out voter turnout and educate people as to who is Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's Lisa Brown, all that. And voter turnout, it's so darn important. I mean, I don't know how many times we've talked about that if we could get 5% more Republican voters out there, we would change this from a blue state to a red state. And when you doorbell, when you talk to people, it's just fascinating to listen to them and say, well, we just don't have a chance because of Seattle, because of King County, because of Pierce County. Could somebody turn the heat down, because I find it rather warm in here. Just so you know, the person that's heading up the CFL in the Spokane area is Kelly Lotz, the recently deposed state committee man of the Spokane County Republican Party. And so we'll just have to see why and what he's going to do. What I understand with CFL is they work a lot with high school students, college students, try to get their energy in to getting the vote out. So again, 2018 is a very, very critical year. Around Washington State, the 3rd and 5th have both been targeted. And our attention, at least this time around, is going to have a little bit of attention paid to it, because so often the Republican Party just sort of looks at Washington and says, it's blue, and they pay no attention to us, and we're standing out here doing, as Mike says, jumping jacks, saying, hey, pay attention to us, pay attention to us. So we'll see how this works. Going to talk a little bit about the 2018 legislation. As you know, the session opened Monday, and as of last night, there were already 217 bills filed. I mean, these people are nuts. I really feel we need to have legislation saying for every bill passed, you need to revoke 5. Or maybe 10. I mean, we got to get rid of some of this garbage. As far as, where the Democrat priorities are, gun regulation, tax on carbon emissions. I don't know if any of you listened to Inslee's long talk yesterday, but it was all about carbon emission taxes. They want more K through 12 spending, and the capital budget is big with the Dems. Rural water policy is big with us, and so we'll see where this all shakes out. The Republicans do have an advantage when it comes to the capital budget, just because we need to fix that Hearst decision, and any bonds that are necessary to implement that capital budget require a 60% approval from the lawmakers. So, that one, hopefully we can hold the line on. That carbon tax is iffy. Lord knows what they're going to do with schools. And the big troubling one is gun legislation. On your tables, you're going to find a piece of paper that looks like this. Now, I have been told by every one of our legislators that even though you know that they're going to vote the way you want them to vote on gun legislation, on carbon tax emissions, on all this other kind of stuff, that they need to hear from you. They need to hear from you that, you're against this, all that kind of stuff. And they, it's like Matt says, the Democrats will roll in with a shopping cart full of emails from their constituents opposing something or for something, and he's got 3 pieces of paper. So it's very important that you do communicate with them, even though you know that they're going to vote the way you want them to. Hey, they're from Eastern Washington. If you're in the 3rd, send 3 emails. Because those guys aren't going to vote the way you want. Oh, woo. I got cough drops. I got that cold. Christmas, or right in around Christmas. And so the cold's gone, but I cannot get rid of my scratchy throat. I've got cough drops. I'm prepared. I'm a Girl Scout.
You need a shot of Fireball.
Fireball works really good. So like I said, 217 bills were filed, and I pulled off some that I thought were rather interesting. So we'll go to these. This is gun stuff. So the Senate Bill 5444 and the House Bill 1387 is talking about enhanced background checks and licensing for assault weapons and large capacity magazines. And the Senate Bill 6049, accompanying bill is House Bill 2422, bans large capacity. So I'll read you the recap of 2422. Prohibits a person from manufacturing, possessing, distributing, importing, transferring, selling, or purchasing a large capacity magazine. And it defines a large capacity magazine as an ammunition feeding device with the capacity to accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition. So those for writing to Shea and Holy and Voles and McCaslin and Maycumber and Kretz, etc. You need to go to the House bills. For the Senate, you need to be looking at Padden. You need to be talking to Shelley Short. You need to be talking to Michael Baumgartner. But you guys have got to start having your voices heard.
Can I interrupt while your throat's getting better? So in California, I have friends in California, and this passed there a couple of years back, and now last year they made it retroactive. So it's not just a slippery slope. I mean, she's got the note on there that, you know, lawfully owned before passage are okay. Well, that's okay now, but it may not be okay in 5 years. And one person commented from down there and said that with the amount of magazines that he had, and I think their tax on the magazines are $25 a year each per it costs more than the magazine. So it's just crazy stuff, and you know, we just don't want to have it go that far here for sure.
Another bill that was just filed today is 2433, and that states, so House Bill 2433, hope you guys are writing this down, states that it is the intent of the Secretary of State and the legislature to, 1, formalize a registration sign-up process for those not yet 18 years old through the establishment of future voter program. Authorizes all persons 16 and 17 years old to sign up to register to vote, and engage the new voters and encourage their civic participation in an educational environment. So you know who that's favoring, right?
Because there's nothing in that statement there that said specifically U.S. citizens.
Yeah. There's another one that Mike's going to be talking a little bit about the city of Spokane and their contribution things. But they have one 2455 that establishes the democracy is strengthened by casting light on spending in Elections Act of 2018. The Washington State Disclose Act closes campaign finance disclosure loopholes and requires the disclosure of contributions and expenditures by nonprofit organizations that participate significantly in state elections. So you'll learn more about what that does. And then there was one that really caught my eye, because I'm going, I don't know how many of you remember, but the Supreme Court of Washington just a couple months ago, a gentleman had challenged King County that their Republican Party of King County didn't elect their district leaders. They appointed them. And the RCW says that they're supposed to be elected. So he filed against the King County, and the Supreme Court ended up saying that the state should not interfere in how parties run themselves. They can do whatever in the heck they want, kind of thing. Don't pay attention to the RCWs. So I saw this one come up, and I'm going, oh, this is interesting. It's filed by Rosselli in our third, and it's an act relating to modifying gender references pertaining to major political party committees. Because right now, What the RCW says is that you have a state chair and a state vice chair that should be of the opposite gender, and you have a state committee man and a state committee woman, obviously of opposite genders. So I thought that what he was going to be doing is saying, well, hey, because the Supreme Court said that our RCWs shouldn't be impacting how the parties run themselves, we'll just get rid of all this garbage. No, what he's doing is scratching the part that says of opposite sexes. So, the chair and vice chair should be of opposite sexes. He is proposing it should be changed to it must have a chair and vice chair who are persons of different declared gender identity. So that's what our 3rd district's doing for us. So you're just going, really? I thought initially it was going to be logical. So how many of you receive an email? It's a daily email from the Washington House Republicans, and it's called Capitol Buzz. It is incredible. And I should have brought I guess if you look at Washington House Republicans and find Capitol Buzz, you could probably subscribe to it. It's a great resource for information. I get a lot of my information there. And all it does is sort of direct you to different articles around the state of what's going on. So I read that Oregon, because it does border states too, had just approved voter registration forms in 4 languages. So I got to wondering, what's Washington? How do we compare? So I checked. Washington offers voters registration forms in 18 languages. Now this is wrong. If English is supposed to be the language of this country, why are we doing this? It makes absolutely no sense. And things like this really need to be brought to the attention of the people, because that's just ludicrous. It's absolutely stupid. So in Washington State, and Mike can correct me, but I believe these were in effect last year for the city of Spokane, but are now imposed for the state, is minimum wage increase from $11 to $11.50 for state, and then by 2020 it goes up to $13.50. Mandatory paid sick leave for full-time, part-time, temporary workers, and the time accrued is that 1 hour for every 40 hours worked, and it covers the worker. It covers a family member of the worker. It covers a health-related closure. So if an office or a school has been closed for a health-related reason, that covers it. And it's also provided under the domestic violence leave law. So a lot of different ways that you can use your sick leave. I have to tell you, I used to have an employee whose husband was a union member, and she just, we had a sick leave policy, and even though she wasn't sick, she just figured that she should take, her day or 2 days off every month. So it's sort of crazy. You have some employees that work when they're sick or never are sick, and you have other employees that take everything that they think they're entitled to. And you sure know who you keep when you have to lay off.
That's discrimination.
It's not discrimination, it's productivity. And we didn't hear a whole lot about this initiative over here on this side of the state. It's Initiative 940, and it's a violence de-escalation initiative. It's called De-Escalate Washington. And they did gather over 350,000 signatures, so we're going to see that on the ballot in November. And I'm just going to read you the ballot summary. This measure would require all law enforcement officers in the state to receive violence de-escalation and mental health training. hope it's mental health training for them and their superiors. No, excuse me. As developed by Criminal Justice Training Commission. It would require law enforcement personnel to provide first aid to save lives, instead of you don't shoot them and leave them, and require law enforcement agencies to adopt guidelines for implementing this duty. It would amend the standards for justifiable use of deadly force by law enforcement, including adding a good faith standard and requiring independent investigation. This is something we've talked about in this area for a good long time. I'm surprised we didn't hear about it, but they got plenty of signatures, and we'll just have to see what they do with it. So we're going to move on to Spokane County. Funny story, I asked Josh, obviously, if he could come, and he's busy. So I said, well, can you get your calendar out now and mark next movie night? And then I looked, next movie night, I believe, is February 14th, Valentine's Day. And he said, Cecily, you're killing me. He says, you know, Nicole, his wife, they have one little boy, Joy. Nicole's, their next baby is a little girl, and she's going to be born right at the end of January. And Valentine's Day, new baby, you know, I doubt we're going to see Josh next month, but I sort of asked him to be here. So anyway, what's exciting, I think, is that he did get voted in as the chair of the 2018 Board of County Commissioners. Al French was the chair last time. He's it this time. And so he sort of gets to set the agenda and that kind of thing, so that's good. His priorities are the budget, cost savings. I mean, Rob Chase is probably the only head of a county department that really went after cost savings and ended up spending less than his budget every year he's been in office. And the staff loves them, and they're effective, and the whole works. And why we can't do this countywide, I don't know. But Josh is really into that. Obviously, economic development, because that does drive up, our tax revenue. A Hearst fix. I do not like what the county decided that they just had to do without seeing. Let's put pressure on the state. Let's really see if we can fix Hearst without the counties doing water banks, metering meters, charging us for that kind. I mean, it's just another revenue stream for them. It's wrong what they've done. And I like his statement, we need to focus on must-dos, not nice-dos. So that's what I've got from the county. So we're going to switch to the city of Spokane. And I feel we're all honored tonight to have Councilman Mike Fagan here. And he's going to update us on what's going on. I will tell you that he did a great presentation for CAPER in October. And on one of the slides, if it comes up here, you'll see that our YouTube's channel is listed there. There are only 29 views to this thing, and it was probably one of the best things that we've ever videoed, showing what we need to be looking at, not just as City of Spokane residents and tax increases, but the public facility district stuff is countywide. I mean, it's not just city. So there's a lot going on within the city that faces all of us. So I think it's very important to... I can flip the slide if Mike wants me to. There we are. He represents the 1st District. He's going to term out. And, he's one of 7 on that council. He lives with a whole blob full of liberals. And I don't know how he handles it. Maybe he, being an Army veteran, helps. And you stop and talk of the boards and commissions that he's on. That's normally the reason he can't be with us on Wednesday nights, because he's at some other meetings. So, welcome.
Woo-hoo. Good evening, comrades. I hope everybody's doing wonderfully. First, I'm going to start off with the good news. Right before Christmas, and as you well know, since 2011, this is the council prior to the one that I was originally elected on, we passed this ordinance called Complete Streets in the city of Spokane, and it really put a damper and a clamp on the opportunities that we could make available to our investors and our developers around town. And that was the rule of thumb all the way up until the last meeting that we had right before Christmas, because after several years of stomping feet and, as you had already seen, doing my jumping jacks in the background, we fought for and we got a waiver to Complete Streets, and we did so for the purposes of facilitating development up in the Yard, or Northeast Spokane, in the industrial area that we've got there. The next street that I'm going to go after, just so that you folks are aware, is going to be Wellesley, and this would be from Market Street all the way over to Beacon Hill. So Freya from Francis down to Euclid right now, we are going to be rebuilding that street in accordance with county road standards and not complete streets. Second item, good piece of news, we just got done, again before Christmas, passing the 2018 budget, and we remain divorced from the likes of Ickley. Okay? And then the last piece of good news, and again, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse because this just happened last Monday afternoon, but by a vote of 6-1, you're now looking at the new Council Pro Tem for the City of Spokane. Council President Pro Tem, I should say. Like I said, I haven't figured out if it's a blessing or a curse yet. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. All right, first issue that I want to tackle just really quick. I'm sure everybody's caught the media coverage with regard to the local campaign finance and disclosure ordinance that the City of Spokane just passed before Christmas, and then overturned Mayor Condon's veto. Let me give you some of the highlights of this thing. First and foremost, you guys know, because it's the most glaring thing in that ordinance, and that private industry is going to be held to a stricter standard than unions, as well as the tribes, believe it or not, because the ordinance itself is silent with regard to the tribes and or what do we call them, sovereign nations, if you will. First and foremost, that particular ordinance did violate the City Council rules, and it violated the City Council rules due to the lack of a fiscal note. We did, a couple of years ago, pass an ordinance that does require, or passed a rule to the council rules that does require a fiscal note on any ordinance that a council member brings forward. That ordinance lacked that. Number two, dependent upon the political dynamics, i.e. whoever's the mayor versus whoever's the council, and in this particular case, the illustration that I foisted up was Mayor Condon is a conservative, the council is liberal, so who is it in the city that you are going to get to administer, manage, and enforce this program? And what I mean specifically by that is when you are looking at that political dynamic, if it is an at-will employee that works directly for the mayor, that could create a bias. If it is an employee that is with the 270 City Employees Union, that could also create a bias. So there's another little something to think about. Contractor restrictions. Any contractor that has a contract $50,000 or more cannot contribute to a candidate. Individual restrictions. We are now restricting individual donations to 50%, whatever is allowable by state law. So if the state law says that I can contribute $1,000 to a campaign, in the City of Spokane, you can only contribute a max of $500. For the most part, as I'd already stated, the unions as well as the tribes are unaffected by this particular ordinance. Challengers to any incumbents will not be able to start their campaigns until the 1st of January that election year. But the ordinance is silent on incumbents who have open C1s and money left over in the bank from their prior campaign. Okay? So talk about enhancing the power of incumbency. Let's see. Obviously, by virtue of Supreme Court ruling, we cannot touch and further regulate independent expenditures from a fiscal standpoint, but from an administrative standpoint, just as Senator Andy Billig is doing at the state level, he is going to require in his dark money bill that we at least identify the top contributors to that. Regardless, the vote that we took in January was 6-1, and then the vote that we took last Monday night to overturn the mayor's veto was also 6-1. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to some of the post-election punch list that I had created right prior to the election, and again, what was referenced by Cecily on the grassroots webpage and whatnot. Believe it or not, several of those viewers of that particular video were liberal individuals and liberal organizations, and the reason why I know that is because they made those statements public when they testified in open forum and tried to use that to attack me while I was sitting there on the dais. So we know that conservatives and liberals are looking at the work. That's right. Okay, if anybody's interested in donning your pink, yes, that's a proper term, or I was going to, yeah, anyway. If anybody is interested in donning their pink hats, there is going to be a parade on January 21st. Everybody's going to be meeting at the convention center. So if nothing else, it might be entertaining to show up and watch and maybe videotape, because I'm sure you're going to be seeing some pretty outrageous costumes. The parade's for women's rights, which I find kind of interesting. You know, it's being propped up by the liberals, and as you well know, liberals don't believe in gender. So why are we calling it a women's march? I don't get it. Yeah, anyway, you want to see, pink, show up at the convention center on January 21st. All right, going down the punch list once again, at the top of the list, as you all know, City of Seattle passed that gun and ammo tax a little bit more than a year ago. It got challenged in court. The City of Seattle won. They are moving forward with the gun and ammo tax, and, as you suspected, the sale of gun and ammos in the City of Seattle went down. Now, there had been some talk by the Spokane City Council about a gun and ammo tax, but I think what's going to end up happening is everybody is going to basically be standing by, awaiting to see what type of successes the Democrats have at the state level this year. What I can tell you is sometime next week, they do have scheduled the ordinance that's now going to prohibit bumper stocks. They're going to be talking about magazine tax or fee, and they are definitely going to be talking about fees on gun sales. I haven't seen anything with regard to ammo yet at the state level, but who knows? That could very well be coming. There was some discussion on that videotape with regard to a sidewalk property tax or a levy lid lift. I'm kind of thinking that discussion has been placed on hold in lieu of being replaced by another tax that I'll be getting to here in just a minute. As you all know, Seattle passed that sugar soda tax, and the results of which have been posted on social media. Mind-blowing, isn't it? Doubling the cost of soda pop and Gatorade and things to that effect. Well, just know that our own 3rd Legislative District, State Representatives Ormsby and Riccelli are floating a similar bill which puts a much higher tax on sugar beverages at the state level. So we'll wait and see what the heck happens with that. And once again, as you all know, Brian Beggs was pushing a soda tax in the city early last year. So again, dependent upon what happens at the state level, I can see some close coordination happening here with the city. A couple of the dynamics in the city have changed. Cecily mentioned former state senator Lisa Brown running now against Kathy McMorris Rogers. I have to correct you with all due respect because she's actually Lisa Brown McClatchy now. She ended up getting married, I think it was late November, early December. Does anybody recognize the name McClatchy? McClatchy happens to be Brian McClatchy, who is the Spokane City Council policy advisor / lawyer. Okay? So now we have a direct connection and a communications conduit with Lisa Brown. As a result of Kate Burke getting elected, we now have a communications conduit in both directions with the state legislature, specifically the 3rd Ledge District. Okay? So what am I implying? I'm implying that the Democrats have really wired the city of Spokane. Period. And, reflecting back on my comments with regard to the campaign finance reform, I wasn't kidding when I said that Mayor Conan and Councilmember Mike Fagan are going to be the last conservatives elected in the city of Spokane. Now, why do I say that? I say that because we know that there are far more liberal funding pools available in the city as well as the state. And if you take a look at the PDC campaign finance reports of some of my colleagues, you're going to know that a lot of the nonprofits, a lot of the unions and things like that, though that kind of money comes from the west side. Okay? And I don't know what the ratio is. My gut tells me it's about 4-to-1, 5-to-1. Liberal funders versus conservative funders. Okay? So, man, I'm telling you, future campaigns are really, really going to have to be sharp. And it's really sad that, people cannot win their campaigns and get elected based on their character versus the size of their wallet. It really sucks. And to be real frank and straight up with everybody here, both times that I had to vote on this campaign finance org, I'm sitting there almost throwing up in my mouth. I got sick to my stomach. Why? It's because I'm sitting next to a bunch of people who have capitalized and exploited the current system to get where they are at now to only do what? Mess it up for everybody in the future. No doubt. It's just sickening. All right, continuing on with the tax and spend list. We are feverishly now talking about a North Bank sports complex. The discussions that we had throughout last year put a price tag on that North Bank sports complex. This is North Bank of the Riverfront Park, $42 million. That was the figure that was thrown out last year. We're also looking at a bike share program. We're spending $80,000 right now studying a bike share program.
I do just want to point out to everybody that a public facilities district is countywide. It doesn't just apply to the city. So that $42 million will be in, hit your pocketbook, not just city residents.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Bike share program. We're already spending $80,000 on that. We're going to centralize that bike share program, of course, downtown and around Riverfront Park. What I can tell you is you probably heard me previously talking about the 2012 figures on what it costs the city of Spokane to put in bicycle lanes. We're only talking about the striping and the figures that you put on the street, the little bicycle lane symbol and things like this. $63,350 a lane mile. That was a 2012 figure. Last year, we did 2 miles of bicycle lanes downtown, and per lane cost on that is now a little bit more than $10,000 higher. So we're looking at about $74,000 for every mile of bicycle lane that we put in the city. And we now have a little over 100 miles of bicycle lanes. Several years ago, we applied for a FEMA grant, and we did so for the express purpose of seeing what the addition of firefighters would do to the city's insurance rating. Because the city's insurance capability and rating that we get from scoring agencies actually drives, in part, your homeowner insurance. So we went ahead and applied for a $9 million grant, and that grant allowed us to hire up to 50 firefighters for 2 years of employment with no renewal. And these people were out there being interviewed and made to understand that this would be at least a 2-year position. Through the likes of attrition, through disability, through retirements, etc., we're probably going to be able to absorb about half of that 50 number, But at the end of the day, we're going to end up having to come up with money now to sustain about 20 to 25 additional firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. And the discussion that we're having to do that, and this is not a method of taxation that is utilized in municipalities, normally utilized out in the rural communities, but it's called a fire benefit charge, or FBC. So you guys get in front of the computer the next time, look up the word fire benefit charge, and that'll give you a little bit of an idea of how that particular mechanism works. What I can tell you is it is tied directly to your property tax. All righty. Last year late, your Spokane City Council renewed the 6-year program for the Photo Red program. So we just renewed our Photo Red camera program. We've got at least 12 cameras located in and around downtown. And we have 2 photo radar cameras currently set up at 2 of our elementary schools in Spokane, one on Northwest Boulevard, as well as one on North Nevada Street. Now, we are going to be adding 2 additional locations. One of those locations is going to be putting a camera off of approximately Rowan and Maple and Ash. So we're actually going to be putting cameras on Maple and Ash, right at about Rowan. And we're going to be putting a photo radar camera on Monroe Street in between Francis and Wellesley in support of Wilbur Elementary, which happens to be 2 blocks to the east of Monroe. We're going to be putting a photo radar enforcement camera there. Both of those programs generate upwards of about $3 to $4 million a year. February, we've got a school bond levy coming up. And, probably the biggest talking point in the school bond levy, and this would be the last year of the current mill rate on the previous levy, you're paying approximately $3.77 per 1,000 of assessed value. The levy renewal that we're looking at for a February special election is going to bring that mill rate down to $1.50. Okay? And that levy is going to be good for at least 3 years. In November, though, you're going to see what I believe is going to be a hybrid in a bond. And this is going to be a bond where the Spokane Library System and the Spokane School Board, our school district, comes together because we're seriously having discussions about locating libraries next to schools or attaching them to schools. And then allowing, yes, as a matter of fact, one of the illustrations here would be Shaw Elementary in my district in Hilliard. And we're talking about shutting down the Hilliard Library and moving it across the street and attaching it to the newly renovated Shaw Middle School. Now, when we get done with Shaw Middle School, it's probably going to look very, very similar to Salk Middle School, which just got reopened here last year. But the point of the matter is, when we were talking about library bond just itself, with the expansions that we got that were being proposed at the main library downtown, the Shadle Library, the Hilliard Library, the demolition and rebuild of the South Hill Library, we were talking about a bond measure that was upwards of a little over $90 million. Apparently not. I can tell you that School District 81 right now, by virtue of the lower class size initiative from many years ago, is on a mission to produce at least 3 middle schools and a handful of elementary schools. So as far as potential siting is concerned, if you guys are familiar with the city water department at Foothills in Nevada, we're thinking about putting a middle school there on that property. There's been some discussion with regard to downsizing Joe Albee Stadium and siting a middle school there. And we'll just have to wait and see as the year progresses how this hybrid bond measure is going to end up coming together. But again, just the libraries alone, we were looking at a little over $90 million price tag on that. Landlords. Yes, the assault on landlords and property owners is going to continue. Even though we are catching our breath right now, we did do several things in passing the human rights ordinance that we passed last year. We followed up with the ban the box. Now we're looking at banning the box on housing applications. We continue to talk about business license for landlords, rental registry programs, as well as city inspections. A couple of the other things that we did last year, we again renewed for the next 6 years the auto tab license fee. $20 license fee in the city of Spokane has been renewed for 6 years. As I discussed the onset of this list, we talked a little bit about a sidewalk property tax. So here's where the discussion on the license tabs has gone. State law allows municipalities and counties to start out with a $20 license tab. We can then double that without a vote of the people. And then 2 years after we have that doubled amount on the books, we can raise it another $10. So we can raise your license tabs over the course of 2 to 3 years up to $50 without a vote of the public. Yes, that's on top of the state fees. This is called TBD on your license renewal. Believe me, we get a lot of calls. They're going, oh, what the heck is this? You know, to be determined? And then there's a charge there? I don't know. But we do definitely get a lot of questions and calls with regard to that. And by the way, you know, Cecily, I really got a kick out of the one slide that you put up there on the state level with regard to the various languages and the amount of languages that we have for our ballots and our voter registration information. Well, get this, folks. In School District 81, that district is dealing with children in 77 different languages. Is there something really wrong with that? I would highly recommend everybody get familiar with Teddy Roosevelt's speech dated in 1907, where he basically laid down the law and said, look, we got one language in the United States, and that's English. We got one flag, and that's Old Glory. And if you don't like it, go pound sand. Let's see what else I got on my list. I think that's going to about do it for the moment. Oh, yeah, there is one other thing that I do want to mention. I'm sure that everybody has kind of caught the news in the last 24 or 48 hours. A gentleman by the name of Bob West has been fired from the city of Spokane. And, boy, I tell you, you want to talk about putting an ugly stain on elections in general. And this really spans not only the city of Spokane, but the city of Spokane Valley. I would recommend everybody keep a pulse on this because this discussion is not done by a long shot. And I have a sneaky suspicion that this is going to get really ugly. So, you know, grab on and hang on with your dear lives, folks, because it's going to be a real interesting meeting. It's going to be an interesting series of meetings this year. Oh. Well, you know, we had discussed a little bit about the sit and lie ordinance and the panhandling policies that the city has had since I came into office 6 years ago. And there was some talk last year of very possibly caving into some of the constant or consistent testimony that we get at our open forums with regard to the illegality of sit and lie and the panhandling and whatnot. But as a result of a standing committee meeting that I attended on Monday, that was all nothing but public safety. It looks like, and again, just for the record, when we passed the panhandling ordinance in the city of Spokane, that vote was 6-1. Why? It's because we didn't make it citywide. I knew that if we just centralized it downtown, we would push that problem throughout the rest of the city. That's exactly what has happened. And now we've got business owners and whatnot screaming at the mayor and the city council with regard to panhandling in other areas besides downtown. So it looks as though we may very well be considering expanding the panhandling policy and have it apply citywide as opposed to just downtown. That's right. Sit and lie ordinance was another series of issues that the current council kind of walked into when we originally got placed into office, and that involved folks capitalizing, exploiting sidewalks downtown. I'm talking about, homeless individuals laying across the sidewalk, giving passerbys the bum rush, aggressive panhandling, things to that effect. If you folks recall, we were having an issue with packs of juveniles that were running around downtown, destroying, vandalizing, laying all over the street furniture and things like this. And that caused the current council to come together and put together what we call the sit and lie ordinance. And, basically it's an ordinance that does not allow, what's that term when you're just kind of hanging around in the area? Loitering. There you go. This is like one step above the loitering. And we thought it'd be a good way of keeping people moving, not blocking the sidewalks, not impeding business, things to that effect. And I can tell you, since we started that I can say is a program that has actually worked. That ordinance actually worked. When we started 4 or 5 years ago, we had 50 plus citations that ended up getting written the first year and a half that this thing was in place. And then as the word got out, we started to see the number of citations go down. I can tell you through 2017, probably less than 10. And I mean, this used to be a huge, huge problem downtown. So it does not look as though we're going to be removing sit and lie anytime in the real near future, because it is working. But it does look as though we may be expanding our panhandling policy in the city of Spokane. So with that, any questions? Yes, sir.
A handle on the panhandlers, a number of them that may be perhaps released from jails in the west side, maybe from Seattle or that area, Kings County or something?
Well, what I can tell you is from all over the country. As I'm sure you guys can well imagine, some of the volunteer activities that council members do, the mayor does. We go and visit the nonprofit organizations. We're filling Thanksgiving baskets. We're handing clothes to homeless individuals, things to that effect. And all through last year, I heard nothing but this kind of talk from employees of nonprofits who are providing these services every day throughout the year. They have people that actually walk up to them, get their merchandise and whatnot, their services, and they're making statements such as, the guys over at Western State, when they released me, they gave me tickets to come to Spokane. Las Vegas, and I don't know if it's a city or if it's a nonprofit in Las Vegas, gives tickets to come to Spokane. A week ago, I was told by a homeless individual that he got a ticket from Florida to come to Spokane. And there was another impactful illustration, but it just kind of slipped my mind. Yes. Last September, the council set aside a Monday night, an actual city council meeting. We did nothing but took testimony on the homeless issue for 4 hours. The first guy that walked up to that podium and testified was homeless, and his statement was pretty much to the effect of, look, I've been homeless for a lot of years. I just moved up here from LA because I can't get this kind of services in LA that I can get in Spokane. I do sit on the Community Housing and Human Services Board this year, and I'm definitely going to be asking those kinds of questions. What do we do? How do we ferret it out? How do we react? What are we going to do? Because, Spokane has become this beacon on the hill for the homeless, for the service mongers, the whole thing. And, I tell you, we can't keep up with what we got at this point. I mean, we're already, this year, this budget, we have already committed to 1% of the general fund going to human services. So it's almost $2 million there. And that doesn't count the 12 to 13 to 14 million bucks that we get from the federal government and HUD on community development block grants and other types of grants that we get on an annual basis. So we're spending a lot of money. Yes, sir. The question was, do I or the mayor anticipate some kind of a legal challenge to the campaign finance ordinance? You know, I have always said that nothing's illegal till you get caught. Okay? And basically, I can't be the one, that takes the lead on suing, because obviously I don't have the time and I don't have the financial wherewithal to do that. And if the mayor was thinking about getting the city attorney involved in this, we have not had that conversation as of yet. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, Cecily's here, and that's my cue. So thank you very much for the time. Look forward to a big 2018. And, guys, like I said, the Democrats have got the city of Spokane wired, okay? We've got a plant in Kate Burke right now that's a brand new council member. Again, she's that conduit between the state legislature and the city council. And then, of course, you got Brian McClatchy, who is the city council's lawyer, who is now married to Lisa Brown. So you want to talk about an unholy alliance, guys. Yeah, no kidding. All right. Anyway, again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate Mike being able to spend this evening with us. As I said, they're busy, busy people, but there's so much going on, and we tend to ignore the city of Spokane, but it is a pimple in the middle of everything, and we've got to figure out a way to get rid of it. Okay. Oh, the reason I put that slide up, again, if you see in the top, youtube.com/Northwest Grassroots/videos, that is where, NW for Northwest, that is where you're going to find all of our videos for past meetings, for like the Caper meeting I was speaking of, things that way. A lot of information there. If you subscribe to that channel, then when new videos go up, you're notified. So please do that. It just saves a lot.
Yeah,
okay. John wants to say something.
Well, I just want to say that, sharing those videos are great. So like the one at the Caper meeting with Mike, I mean, I'm surprised we only have that many people. Some of our videos have 2,500 views, but we really need to share those with your Facebook page and your friends so that they see what's going on here. I mean, this is a national problem. It's not just here, it's everywhere. So we need to make people know that, so they'll start standing up and going to city council meetings and getting pissed off and voting some new people in.
Okay. So what I want to do now is we're going to switch to the city of Spokane Valley, because they are a shining star, but they dimmed a little bit this last election. So giving us an update tonight is going to be Spokane. You guys got the address? Okay, good. It is the mayor of the city of Spokane Valley, Rod Higgins. First of all, I want to congratulate him on his second term as mayor. The vote count that I have up there shows you what we are dealing with. It's a council of 7. The yeses for him were Sam Wood, Arnie Woodard, Pam Haley, and Rod. And the nays were Brandy Peets, Bob West's daughter, the person he campaigned for illegally, Ben Wick, and Linda Thompson. So like I've said over and over and over and over, elections have consequences. And it means that you've got to move your feet, you've got to talk to people, you've got to distribute literature, you got to get the word out, because those 3 people, Peets, Wicks, and Thompson, have absolutely no business in our Spokane Valley City Council, in my opinion. So to me, it was disappointing to see how that election turned out. I think Rod's going to have his hands full. And what I'm hoping for is that they're all going to get mad like the last group did, take their ball and go home and quit, and then we can reappoint and get a good council in again. But thank you, Rod, very much for coming, and we appreciate you for being here. And we're glad at least you have some people on your side, not like Mike, who's there as a lone wolf inside the orange lines.
Right on.
Hey, congratulations, Mayor.
Yeah.
Well, I've learned over the years when you follow Spokane, be brief.
Could you give me the water?
Everything that Mike said, I've heard some of before. What's disturbing is that list is growing.
Oh, jeez.
And it used to be kind of funny, us being in the valley, that we were absorbing people trying to escape Spokane. It's not funny anymore. You know why? Because that stuff, you watch what's happening in Seattle with their city council, seems to happen in Spokane with their city council, and pretty soon it migrates to the legislature and becomes state law. And that is scary, okay? Because this little bright spot on a very cloudy day called Spokane Valley can only stand so long. You know, 2 years ago, we came close to being Spokane by 99 votes. This time it was 250. So I don't know if that's an edge or not. I can tell you this, that we're not confronted with anywhere near the problems that Mike is. And maybe it's because he's term limited out and he can go home and improve his golf game, relax, get into single malt scotch again or something.
We want him to run for Stucker's position.
Oh, capital idea. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, quick update on what's happening in Spokane. The three names that you mentioned, Peets and Wick and Thompson, we thought, okay, we're going to stick to city business here, okay, and not do ancillary business. That's been a criticism of our city council. And so the very first thing, Linda Thompson was appointed to the the Health District Board. And she comes back immediately to the next council meeting and says, we have got to take up a resolution in support of raising the legal tobacco age to 21.
Jeez.
Now, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I hear a lot of cross currents about, well, gee, if we can fight for our country at 18, why can't we buy? And I can remember back in the mid-60s traveling to New York, and the legal drinking age for everything was 18. So, you know, I don't know, but these are issues that are not necessarily city issues that we're once again confronted with. And once again, Linda, we a couple of years ago, the sheriff was instrumental in putting together a human rights commission for the city. And the world has been right ever since then, except that we were asked to send a delegate to that commission, and so I thought Ed Pace would be appropriate. And if you know Ed Pace, that is, you should smile, okay? Ed immediately asked when he was, they wanted him to sign this, hey, we're on board type thing. Ed said, well, I really can't do that because I see nothing in here about protection of unborn children, and furthermore, there's no protection for anybody of the Caucasian race. Well, anyway, you get the picture. Well, they didn't want Ed back, and so we didn't have a representative until last meeting. The president of this organization came to our meeting and said, hey, now that the world has turned, we want somebody. And so Linda immediately picked it up and said, well, we've got to have somebody. So I suspect we'll be looking at that one again.
Yeah, just say no.
You could still send Ed.
I know. And believe me, I thought about it. This is not over yet. Anyway, a couple of quick things. Our major problems are not anywhere near yours, Mike. We're trying to deal with nuisances, like crack houses and stuff like that. We're trying to figure out how we can expeditiously and quickly and decisively get rid of these clowns. And let me tell you, state law makes it very difficult to do that.
Send them to the city of Spokane.
A bus ticket? Well, the next thing you'll be advocating for a wall at Havana. You know? Okay, well, we're in the process of doing something about, as quickly as we can and as decisively as we can, doing something about that. We are, of course, renowned for the best roads around, and you'd be surprised how difficult it is to keep on funding that sort of thing. And we have a couple of opportunities here, and last night I saw, just the darndest thing. We have an opportunity to recoup some of our garbage collection money to apply to our residential roads at no cost. I shouldn't say at no cost, everything has a cost, at no differential in your garbage bill in the valley, okay? Now, this window will close on, April 1, when the new billing cycle comes in. And last night we saw the three people, who shall remain nameless at this point, playing politics. And it was rather disappointing. It really was, because here it is, for the good of the valley, they're playing games. What the game is if we pass on this opportunity, we will still address those roads, but we'll be doing it with a tax that'll be much more onerous than we could get by with right now. Anyway, that's coming down the road. Barker Road, the interchange, we, as you're well aware, our city is bisected by not one but two railroads, and Burlington Northern being the largest with 60 trains a day, upwards of, and climbing. And right now, Barker Road is our number one priority. And that, well, there's a whole backstory here. The bid for the cost of that rail crossing there was $36 million at one time. After we shook the tree a little bit and had some staffing changes and whatnot, that price tag has come down to 20. And we have managed to put together with some pledged fees and our own money, about close to 16 of that. And we've got, of course, Tiger grants and Fast Lane grants and all the other acronyms that come with federal wants. And I suspect that in 2019 we are going to have broken ground on that overpass over Trent on Barker. And that's step one, followed then by Pines, followed then by Park, and someplace along the line we're going to have to deal with the rail crossing at Sullivan. But that's the railroad this time. Anyway, I've rattled enough. Any questions about what's going on in the valley? Yes, Jacqueline?
I'd like to know if the Valley is going to conduct any investigation into the electioneering with West and Pete's.
You know, oddly enough, we have a request for something like that, but actually that's not in our purview. That is a Public Disclosure Commission or an auditor study. There's not really a whole bunch we as a city can do about that. So to answer your question, no, not right now. Yo.
Well, Rod, you mentioned and Mike mentioned that we should keep an eye on the Bob West debacle and fallout. And Bob West was fired by the city human rights and the complaints that came through there. However, similar activities took place on the county level using county time through another individual that nobody has done that same kind of oversight and accountability. Now, do you have any comments on that next level by this county official?
I think I know the county official you're probably talking about, and you'd have to put up some dots that then you'd have to connect, and this is supposition, but let's look at it like this. You're talking about Mike Munch, and Mike was, as a juvenile, had a conviction on his record. Obviously, that came out in the paper. That's no secret. What happened, however, is that that was not in this county. It was in Stevens County. And so when Mike went to have his certain rights, such as being able to buy a gun, restored, his record, which was sealed because he was juvenile, was reopened. And it was not, I think this is dereliction by his attorney, who should have automatically resealed it again, but didn't. So that record was open. But you had to know about this and how to go about finding it and stuff, and there are probably only a few people here that really knew how to go through that procedure. Well, there's a lot more to the story, and it need not be gotten into right here, but yeah, I'm not sure you'd ever get to the bottom of that one because there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but I'm not sure you're going to see anybody with a hand in the cookie jar. Okay?
Okay, we have one more up here, and then we're going to say thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick thing, Rod, on the garbage. You talked about some funding that was available through the garbage collection fees.
Yes.
And some politics being played.
Yes.
You have a majority. Is there a supermajority necessary to make that happen, or what's up?
No, this is not a tax, it's a fee. It is a road maintenance fee. Actually, it's a damage fee imposed upon the haulers of garbage for destruction of our roads, okay? We've made that legal distinction, and yes, we do have the supermajority to raise taxes, therefore we were very careful with that. And we intend, yes, we do have a majority. There were 4 heads nodding to move it ahead to a first reading, and it's going there, and we'll get it done. Okay. Pray.
What can be done to help the Spokane Valley? Not just that particular thing, but everything.
Well, it's obvious. You got to show up and testify.
Yep. Got to go to the meetings, got to testify. Mike would love to see some more shining faces at Spokane City, and I know Rod would like to see support at Spokane Valley.
Indeed. Meetings where you can actually testify are the second and fourth meetings of each month. Those are what we call a formal meeting.
Second and fourth Tuesday.
Tuesday, right. And they begin at 6 o'clock. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much. We are going to whiz along here. Thank you. So I know Rod's up to the task. It's going to get done. I really think that you can discourage these folks from staying on the council if you show up, and that's going to help a lot. So please do. Going to talk very briefly about upcoming events. We've got the Ponderosa Women, and this is an interesting speaker that they have tomorrow. And the U.S. Supreme Court is going to hear a case called Janus versus the AFSCME, which is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. What's at stake is whether unions will be able to continue to force workers to join their ranks. A ruling is expected in June at the end of the court's term on whether workers are going to have that freedom of choice. Because so many workers are forced to join the union, they're forced to pay dues, their dues go to political candidates that those people don't want to see walk on the earth, let alone be in office, and they're forced to do so. So this is a very interesting Supreme Court case, and Aaron Shannon, who is with the Washington Policy Center, will be talking on that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, good meeting to go to. Friday morning breakfast, I don't believe Rob is here. They may change their location, but right now, Friday will be Jim Wentland, who is the president of the Spokane County Cattlemen. 19th, I don't know. They may be changing location. I'm sure he'll send out emails if they are. Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, Thursday, January 25th, Argonne Library. Their lobbyist, Cindy Alia, will be there, and she has been working extremely hard on the Hearst decision and the water rights within. So again, if water rights, the Hearst decision, all that good kind of thing is your interest button, then write down January 25th, Argonne Library. I made myself a New Year's resolution that I'm going to mention this at least once every meeting. So now I just have 11 months to go. You know, seriously, it does take a little bit of money to keep all of this going, so your help is appreciated. We are going to get into tonight's presentation. I'm going to try to hurry it along. We advertised it as the Dreamers and DACA, but there's so much that's involved in this. It's pretty darn crazy. So we're going to start with funding the government, because both parties are using the threat of a government shutdown to push their agendas. So this short-term spending bill expires on January 19th. So all it is a bill authorizing the Treasury to continue to pay bills even though the budget has not been adopted. It's another way of saying that we're just once again going to kick the can down the road. So just so you know that the U.S. government's fiscal year is an October 1st to a September 30th fiscal year. So the budget should have been approved before October 1st, 2017. The administration submitted that budget to Congress in March of 2017. So they had plenty of time to do something about it. It's a $4.1 trillion budget. And our Congress started debate on October 17th. So it shows you just how much we pay attention to all this good kind of stuff. So what we did is we kicked the can down the road from October to December, and then we re-kicked it to January, and that's what everybody's talking about. We also kicked the CHIP program down the road. That's the Children's Health Insurance Program. It provides health insurance to approximately 9 million children whose families earn too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to really provide good health benefits for their children. And then the warrantless surveillance program, talked a lot about that here, is part of Section 702 for the FISA Amendments Act. And it allows the FBI and NASA, the NSA, not NASA, but the National Security people to collect phone calls, emails, texts, and other electronic messages for foreigners without a warrant, even when they're talking with Americans. So this is, if you go to current, this is how Flynn got cut up in the whole mess, because they didn't even need a FISA warrant to listen in if he was talking to a foreigner. So we don't like that warrantless surveillance program. We think the NSA has far too much power. We don't think we need to be surveilled. I don't believe it's made us safer. You know, we gave up so much for, quote, security after 9/11, and we're just destroying this country. So funding the government, we'll get back to that, and here's just a little history. The Budget Control Act of 2011, so remember we elected Obama in 2008, the markets had crashed, housing values were down, you know, everything was just doom and gloom. And so it was designated to control the federal spending and to reduce spending by $10 trillion over 10 years. $1 trillion, you know, every year. And it would enact an automatic budget reduction if Congress didn't agree on specific cuts. and that would force Congress to vote on a balanced budget amendment also. So that was part of the bill, is that Congress was to develop a balanced budget amendment. They were to vote on it to amend the U.S. Constitution, and then that would go out to the states and go through the amendment process. So, believe it or not, 2011 is just like today. The bipartisan Joint Committee was unable to reach agreement on the cuts, and so the automatic across-the-board spending caps went into effect. And we all got introduced to the word sequestration. So just so you know, there are two caps. One is for defense and one's for discretionary spending. The reason it's discretionary is because 70% of the budget other than military is all in entitlements, so we don't have a lot to work with there. And the balanced budget amendment did not receive the required 2/3 needed to send it to the states for ratification. So that was this big hoo-ha in 2011 about getting our budgets under control and saving money. Okay. So we're going to talk about sequestration, because it's that enforcement mechanism that they set to keep the budget aligned to what they wanted to happen in 2011. So it forces cuts to each budget item of the budget on the same percentage rather than focusing on non-essential items. So just think of your home, and you've had your income reduced and you've got to look at your budget. Are you going to look at your budget and say, well, let's see, income got reduced by 20%, so we're going to cut everything by 20%. Well, you can't do that. You've got some fixed expenditures that can't change, and then you've got sort of those non-essentials, going out to the movies, going out to dinner, your cable bill, a massage once a week or once a month or whatever. Those kinds of things are what you would cut in order to meet what you needed to meet. So sequestration is really the worst type of budgeting that you could ever think of. And it's to me, it's really cutting the dumbest things that you'd do. It just, not just the dumbest, but the smartest. I mean, it's what we need. So right now, the Trump administration budget requires the defense cap to be raised. The Democrats want both the military cap and the domestic caps raised. So again, the threat of sequestration is what's taking place. It's a threat. It's not going to happen. The budget caps went into effect in 2013 because 2011, that bill passed late. 2012, they're trying to figure out what it is. So 2013 is when it really happened. And that was the year that it did trigger sequestration. But since then, ever since then, they've raised the caps rather than doing the sequestrations thing. So right now, the Republicans are working on trying to figure out a way to do away with the caps by 2019, 3 years ahead of what the 2011 Act requires. And they're wanting more military, and I mean, it's just everybody's going back and forth, and it's just a mess. So I think what you can see is all the efforts that we've put in to control spending, reduce the deficit, shrink the government, have mostly been a wasted effort. We've heard a lot of it on the news, but it really hasn't accomplished a blessed thing. So right now, what we've got are the Democrats holding several issues hostage in this funding fight. Now, they don't have anything to do with the funding fight, but they're wanting to have resolution to them in order to pass the continuing resolution to kick the can down the road a little bit more. So that's why we're hearing a lot of this. So as an example, the House passed a disaster relief bill of $81 billion. The Democrats are saying that doesn't provide enough relief for Puerto Rico. So therefore, that bill has stalled in the Senate, and nothing's going forward with disaster relief for Texas, for Florida, for Puerto Rico, because they want more money. And so they're saying, well, we won't do anything about the continuing resolution unless you do something about disaster relief. We need more money. And they've done the same thing with DACA and the Dreamers. And I really should say Dreamers and DACA, because Dreamers, that word came up first long before DACA. They're just looking at it as a good negotiating tool. It's sort of holding it hostage to the whole thing about how do we fund the government. So pushing these two issues up against a deadline, in my opinion, is not the way that leads to any meaningful kind of legislation, but it seems to really be the way that Congress gets most stuff done. I mean, it's amazing to see that they have health bills and tax bills and this and that they need to get done, and they put it off to the very last minute, and then they cobble stuff together instead of really making good, meaningful legislation. Martin.
There was a gift handed to the president here recently, the Ninth Circuit.
Right, we will be talking about that.
That'll come up in
Correct.
June, so that's
Yeah. We will be, we're going to be chattering about all this kind of stuff that's going on. It's pretty crazy. So that's sort of your background. So the Dreamers and DACA really shouldn't apply to funding the government, but everybody's trying to, move their chess pieces around and make it work. So let's talk about immigration, because it sure has been in the news. And I chose a little bit of a long video, it's not too long, explaining a little bit about the situation we find ourselves in. So it's more educational, it's not really entertainment, but I want you to really understand what the Dreamers and what DACA are all about. Click again.
Hello, my learning friends. Welcome to Hit Pew's History as we attempt to tackle the Dreamers, not literally, but as President Trump prepares to suspend what is known as DACA and kind of throw the ball of immigration back to Congress. I thought it was the perfect opportunity to explain who are the Dreamers, what is DACA, what is DAPA, and what are both sides of the issue. And then you can leave it down in the comments below, because that's what you do on the YouTubes. All right, my friends, why don't we go giddy up for the learning and go get her done. Right. So before we get to the Dreamers, we're actually going to rewind to 1986, and DREAM is actually a piece of legislation. We'll get there. But in 1986, you have a Ronald Reagan-signed piece of legislation called the Immigration and Control Act. And this was supposed to wipe the slate clean when it came to illegal immigration. At that time period, we'd had about 3 million illegal aliens in the United States. And as part of that legislation, basically amnesty was granted to those individuals as long as they registered, paid back taxes. They had a path to citizenship. Now, along with that, there was supposed to be a tightening of security, more border patrol agents, and a big clampdown on business through something that later will be called an E-Verify system, to make sure that workers couldn't be hired by businesses unless they were legal aliens with the right working papers. Now, that legislation is going to fail on that part, and it's also going to fail to include any type of program to really deal with this business problem and bring people here legally, even if it's with temporary green cards, to kind of fill that economic vacuum which does exist. So because of the failures of the Immigration and Control Act, you still have, millions of people that are coming over here for those work opportunities, and they're allowed to get them because businesses are hiring them. So by the turn of the century, we're going to have nearly 11 million illegal aliens who are living here and working here. And as these illegal aliens keep coming, they're bringing their children with them. And it's those children that the Congress tries to deal with beginning in 2001. They don't have enough votes to do major immigration reform and do a pathway to citizenship, but they do think they have enough to do something for these children that were brought here under the age of 16 by no will of their own. Their parents brought them here, and this is the only country they know. So in 2001, a Democrat, Dick Durbin, and Orrin Hatch, a Republican from Utah, is going to co-sponsor a legislation that is called the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, D-R-E-A-M. You get it? The Dreamers. Now, that piece of legislation isn't going to make it through, and there's going to be numerous attempts to pass that legislation, culminating in 2010 under John McCain's stewardship of the Gang of Eight, where they got 56 votes in the Senate. That's not enough. You need 60 because of something called the filibuster. There's a video on that. You can look in the description below. But at that point, President Obama decides if Congress isn't going to enact, we can't allow this to continue. These kids, they're allowed to go to public school. That's a court decision going back to 1982 called Plyer versus Doe. So we have to deal with them, and them living in the shadows has negative consequences, not only for these children and their personal lives, but also for the community. If you're an illegal alien, you're much less likely to call the police if there's a problem. And, you know, in terms of educational opportunities after high school and work employment, and really be part of the economic engine of the United States. So at this point, President Obama decides, well, if Congress isn't going to act, I have a pen, I can do executive actions, I can write memorandums, I have cabinet departments, so I'm going to do something about this. And that he does. So let's go back to June 15th, 2012 and learn what DACA is. Deferred action for childhood arrivals. It's no coincidence that it's the 30-year anniversary of Plyer versus Doe, that case that opened up the public school system to children of illegal aliens, that Obama decides to announce this new program, using his executive authority and not conferring with Congress. And that's a problem for a lot of congressmen who are territorial, you know, the whole checks and balances and constitutional thing. But nevertheless, what he's going to do is order Janet Napolitano, who's the Homeland Security Director, to order her agencies like ICE and Border Control to do what's called enforcement discretion, meaning that they can't change the law, but what they can do is decide who they're going to target. And then Obama outlines a procedure by which children that qualify can apply for deferred action, meaning they can come out of the shadows, they can go to school. They're not going to be able to get federal aid, federal welfare, but in many states they're going to be able to get in-school tuition, like in Texas, and in some states they're going to be able to get driver's license and really live a normal life. Now, there's a bunch of qualifications that come along with DACA. The first one being there's like a $495 filing fee. These people have to provide numerous pieces of identification showing who they are. You need to be enrolled in school or be fully employed or be honorably discharged from the military. You can't have a felony or more than 3 misdemeanors. And now you're going to be registered with the government. In a sense, you're coming out of the shadows. You're not a citizen. There's no pathway to citizenship. You can't vote, but you're still going to be paying taxes, which means, in a sense, you're paying into Social Security, which you would never receive because you're not going to be a citizen or have any kind of documentation. Now, that would last for 2 years, and then these dreamers would then have to reapply, and that's what they did. About 800,000, I think it's up to about 1.5 million, have applied and renewed their applications to stay in this country. And that's what DACA is. Now, Obama was hoping that this would only be a temporary solution, that Congress would then come in, seeing what he was doing, and come up with a formal piece of legislation to deal with this issue. And of course, there's many different ideas of what that would look like. But all of them, in some sense, unless you're really hardcore and you want to throw out 11 million people, have some pathway to citizenship and deal with these dreamers. So when that didn't occur, when the Gang of Eight failed, and it was in part because of something that happened in the House of Representatives. I'm going out on a tangent, but the majority leader was a guy by the name of Eric Cantor, and he was running for re-election in his primary. And because of this issue that he was supporting immigration reform, there is a base of the Republican Party, and especially, I believe he was from Virginia, and the part of the state that he was coming from, where the Tea Party and kind of that Trump base came out and defeated Eric Cantor. And it sent a message to the Speaker of the House, we're not going to touch this dreamer thing. We're not going to touch immigration reform. So that brought Obama to the plate again in 2014. He was quite miffed. So he came out and said, if you're not going to deal with the issue, we still have, 8 million people living in the shadows. This isn't good for the economy. It's not good for businesses. It's not good for these personal lives of these people. So he sought to expand DACA by about 300,000 people. He, I think, moved the year back that you needed to be born before. But he also introduced something called DAPA, boy, if it just can't get more confusing. Deferred action for parents of arrivals? You could Google it. But this basically dealt with the parents of children that were born in the United States that were citizens. So you came here illegally, you had a child in the United States, that child is an American, has gone to school, is living his life, her life, and their parent is living in fear of being deported. So Obama wanted to do the same type of discretion in terms of enforcement with the parents of these children. And this basically would have brought up the number of illegal immigrants covered by deferred action to about 45% of that 11 million. So after that occurred, there were a lot of state attorney generals who were really miffed. They're pointing to the Constitution. We're going to talk about arguments in a minute, but they basically sued to have this stopped. And then went all the way to the Supreme Court, which was deadlocked because of the failure to fill Scalia's spot in that Senate, McConnell, and it ended up really being frozen, that Obama wasn't allowed to do that. So it froze at that point, but the Dreamers still existed. That is until, I think, this week. So when President Trump ran in the Republican primary, he promised all of his voters that he would end the deferred action for children arrivals, that he would end it because it was illegal, it was unconstitutional, that Congress did that, not the president. So at this point, the announcement is coming tomorrow that he is seeking to expand the program for 6 months, basically to keep it running, to give Congress a chance to act, to do something. That is probably highly unlikely. We won't get into the nuts and bolts, but Paul Ryan, who leads the House, and Mitch McConnell, who leads the Senate, are very loyal Republicans. And although there might be a bipartisan amount of senators and House members that could do this, they would have to bring it to the floor, and they would have to oppose part of their party, you know, the coalition that is more to the right and more hardcore. So what is going to happen? I guess that's anybody's guess. But before we end this, I thought we would do a nice little summary of kind of pros and cons, and then it's your turn, your turn to leave it down in the comments below. So the basic argument why it is constitutional goes back to a law passed in 1965 called the Immigration and Naturalization Act. It's basically the big immigration law that we're still kind of living with today. But part of that legislation, Congress delegates their authority in terms of enforcement and discretion to the President of the United States. And there's also precedent. This was done under George Herbert Walker Bush. I believe Clinton did it as well. Previous presidents have already done this. Obama's just seeking to do it, or did it, on a larger platform. So that's the constitutional argument. And then there's also that pragmatic argument that this is a problem that needs to be solved, and if Congress isn't doing their job, the president should, in a sense, do everything they can constitutionally, which goes back to that constitutional argument, in order to solve the problem. And Obama would continuously turn to Congress, maybe not doing a very good job communicating with them, but saying it's your job, you need to fix it. And when Congress failed, President Obama sought to take executive action. Proponents of the Dreamers point to the statistics that this has worked, that 95% of Dreamers work or go to school, 63% have gotten better jobs, 54% own a car, 48% have improved their working conditions, and 12% have bought their own home for the first time. That this improves the economy, it improves the United States of America. Now, in terms of what the argument against it is that it's unconstitutional, that Congress writes immigration law. The law is the law is the law. The president's job is to enforce the law, not interpret that enforcement. And the fact of the matter is that these children are here illegally, by no means of their own, but they are here illegally, and they need to be dealt with legislatively, not through the actions of one man, that is tyrannical, that it should be up to the people and the people's house to decide that issue. Opponents also point out to the crime that's associated with some of these illegal immigrants that come over, that they're not regulated, nobody's watching them, and that they basically pose a threat to the security of the United States. So it's basically a law and order argument, and in their eyes, a very constitutional sound argument. So why now? Well, those attorney generals that previously had sued Obama are threatening Trump by September 5th that they're going to go after DACA and after him allowing it to continue unless he ended the program. So those are members of his own political party, and he also promised his political base that he was going to end it. Even though he said, "I love the Dreamers," it looks like he's going to fulfill that promise. So now that you know what DACA is, what the Dreamers are, what some of the arguments are, it's time for you to leave it down in the comments below. Go engage in the American sport of debate, but keep it civil, keep it calm, and keep it smart. There's no need for bullies, my friends.
Explain sort of the background of all of this than me taking forever. So I think you see that the situation does need to be fixed. It is, to my way of looking at it, it's a legislative fix that needs to happen. And I think Trump has been pretty darn forward in kicking the can back over to our elected representatives to start doing their jobs. And so a lot of people are saying Trump's bad and Trump's doing this and Trump hates... No, he's just saying that we need to start acting constitutionally and get this thing straightened out. It can't be fixed by executive order, and Congress are the ones that have got to get it fixed. He gave them 6 months to do so, and as Martin pointed out, we have one of our liberal Ninth Circuit Court judges saying that, it gets extended further, which is probably good for Trump because now we don't have this March deadline that they want to attach on to the continuing resolution. Now, maybe you don't all feel this way, but I can't imagine coming here as a young child, going to school here, graduating from high school, possibly graduating from college, and living under the threat of being deported, and deported to a country that I don't know, and I possibly don't even know the language. That Reagan Immigration Reform and Control Act that granted amnesty to 2.7 million illegal immigrants was paired with promising to control the border and penalizing employers who hired illegal immigrants. So what happened is the promised enforcement never happened. It just didn't occur, but amnesty did. The other thing that happened was that even though the Reagan administration tried to enforce, that was passed by the time they got everything going. There was about a year left. And then we ended up with H.W. Bush, and the Bush administration never enforced the law, and neither did subsequent administrations. So what we're looking at is we have an estimated 12.5 million illegals here. The 1986 law had extreme flaws, and we've just got to be sure not to repeat them. And that's really what we're facing at this point. So are we going to learn from our past mistakes? So what really went wrong? So first of all, green cards under the 1986 law were issued to about 2.7 million people. And that included about 1 million farm workers, but it also left about 2 million illegals untouched. And why were they untouched? Either because they didn't qualify or because they just didn't know about it. 1986 is not like 2017. We don't have the same type of communication out there. And so the publicity was extremely patchy. And there wasn't a plan for those people that were left out. So you had some were given amnesty, and then you had a bunch that weren't. And it was just assumed that they were going to leave because the employer restrictions were going to push them out, but the employer restrictions were never enforced, so there was never any reason for them to leave. And then you got the lobbyists getting into the legislators. And all the restrictions were watered down. E-Verify wasn't required. It was reduced, believe this, it was reduced to all that employers had to do was to make sure their workers had paperwork that reasonably appeared to be genuine. That was it. And so obviously that didn't work. And then what happened, and this is crazy, it was almost the opposite happened, is employers who were trying to follow the law and pay a lot of attention to, scrutinize a worker's nationality, if they did that too aggressively, they were penalized. So it didn't behoove employers to try to follow the law, because if they did, they were getting in trouble too. So to me, that's sort of the beginning of political correctness, Then we had the agricultural, the construction, and the landscaping industries that skirted the paperwork by using contractors and subcontractors. They weren't responsible. It just made it easier for companies to deny the responsibility. And the increased border security, well, initially it was poor funding. And when they did provide for more border patrol in the mid-90s, they didn't anticipate the consequences. So what happened was the El Paso region and the Southern California region were the major regions where the illegals were coming from. But because they increased the border security, what happened was the illegals started to move all across the border, and they also started to move into all parts of the country. Before, they were really focused in California, Texas, and Illinois. I never figured out why Illinois, but they got up north there. And that's where they were going. But when this all got, sort of out there, and there was more border security and more scrutiny, then they started dispersing all over the country. The other thing that the bill didn't do was it didn't consider our country's dependence on agriculture or migrant workers. And they didn't anticipate that that need was going to increase. It wasn't that we just don't know how to handle them now, it's what do you handle them in 2017? That didn't work. So what we did was we created a bottleneck for legal immigration. We enforced very weak rules against illicit hiring, and it just resulted in a boom in illegal immigration. So that's what poor legislation does. So what are the lessons that we should learn from the past? Stringent border security. And we all know that's one thing that Trump is beating the drum for. But what we've got to beat the drum for is building that wall and stringent border security before we grant all of the goodies. Because if you don't have that, then you're just going to encourage people to do as they did before, saying we got to get over there because they're offering goodies. So the border security needs to come first. The next one is scary to me, because can legal status be given to some but not all? And does granting legal status to some encourage more to come? And that's really what happened in 1986. So that's something that's got to be very, very carefully thought out. To me, the next one's easy. Beef up and enforce E-Verify, and stiff penalties for companies that violate. And then I like this next one, develop a reliable and tamper-proof system to prove legal residency. Do you think our country is capable of developing a reliable, tamper-proof national ID card? I just don't think so. Or for that matter, a system to prove legal residency. We get so, I just don't. Because one thing I can say about Americans is that we figure out a way to get around regulation. We figure out a way to get around the tax code. We figure out a way to get around so much. So to me, strict enforcement has got to be strict. The law has to be followed to the letter, and no more picking or choosing as to what to enforce or what not to enforce. And since our agriculture industry really relies, got to get the water, another cough drop, so heavily on migrant workers, we've got to figure out a visa program that works for those migrant workers. And I don't know how many of you remember Clint Didier campaigning against Maria Cantwell a few years back, but I thought he had a brilliant idea. And what it was is because our migrant workers send the majority of their earnings back to their country of origin, or, wherever it is there, pay them 50% of their wages. I do? Well, then go ahead and move it. And 50%, that remaining 50% will be deposited in an account that the visa program would release to them once they surrendered their temporary workers permit and returned to their country. Because right now we don't track visas. We have so many people overstaying visas. But if 50% of their pay was being withheld until they surrendered their visa and returned to their country, you know that they were going to do that. And I really think that you could pay for the wall if you took this idea and applied a service charge to all of these money transfers. And if people say, well, that's terrible that the government would charge them, well, I'm sorry, but banks charge them, Western Union charges them. Any way you try to transfer money around, you're getting charged. So why shouldn't the government? So when you look at that, I mean, even if you just took, Mexico at 5%, you'd be at $1 billion a year. Well, you could pay for that wall in a few years. And then look at the money that's going back to these other countries. So a 5% fee on all money going back to these countries where these workers are sending their money would actually be $6 billion annually. I don't see a big problem with that. And I really see a way that by having accounts where the money they've earned is held, that they are going to, it would help us really track the visas and keep things going. So there's a lot of different ways that things can be done, but we got to get them done. So this is a Trump tweet in December. We must build the wall, stop illegal immigration, end change migration, and cancel the visa lottery. The current system is unsafe and unfair to the great people of our country. Time for a change. So it's sort of interesting. I just love this tweeting. I know a lot of people don't, but I think it's our most reliable source of news from the White House. It does indicate what they want. You're not going to hear it on normal news. And so there it goes. And so let's see how Trump's negotiating skills are going to play out. So the supposed non-negotiable conditions of the deal would be funding for serious border security. And that means infrastructure, the wall, and technology and personnel, ending chain migration, ending the visa lottery program. And, those conditions should not be negotiated for fixing this Dreamer and DACA situation. And then, fix that DACA situation, but then write new and enforceable immigration laws. We need to look at immigration laws that benefit the United States. We don't need to look at immigration laws based on the need of other people to be here. We need to look at immigration laws as what they can do to make our country greater. So right now the administration is asking for $33 billion to increase the security along the southern border. That plan doubles the fencing from 654 miles to around 1,000 miles. So you're going, wow, about all this kind of stuff. So I'm researching and reading and stuff. And I came across an interesting statistics. In 1988, there were 15 border walls in the world. Now there are over 70, and 2/3 of those were constructed after 9/11. So we're all talking about how terrible the idea is of a wall, et cetera, et cetera. 70 other countries have them between their borders, but we aren't supposed to. In the personnel area, the $15 billion there, it would increase Border Patrol and other officials by 5,000, and that increase would occur over 7 years. Now, as far as technology goes, we're already using drones. We're using high surveillance towers with cameras capable of spotting objects and people about 7 miles away. And we have motion sensors. The drug cartels are also using drones to smuggle drugs into the country. And then we're also using blimps filled with helium called tethered aerostat radar systems as surveillance devices. And they go up to about 15,000 feet. They're attached to the ground by a cable. And I want you to see what they look like. I think they're sort of cute little guys, little tethered blimps. And, so we have things going on. I think the technology put along with the wall in areas where the wall works is a good thing. We have our drug people using drones to deliver drugs. We've got them catapulting over sections where there are walls. They're creative. And so we need to really get up to speed on what are we going to do to secure that southern border. Now, this is a point that I feel very, very, very strongly about. I do not feel an illegal alien, whether they came here as 1-year-old or 16-year-old, should ever be rewarded the possibility of becoming a United States citizen, ever. I think citizenship should be reserved for those who have come here legally, and there's nothing really horrible about being a permanent resident. So I believe the pathway for these illegals should be to get their green cards and become a permanent resident. But I do think that if we had that restriction, that they would be have the same advantages of being a citizen, but not being looked at as a block of people that we can manipulate for votes. Because they're being used right now. They're being absolutely used. But if they had no possibility of voting, then we might get some fair legislation for the United States. So I want to read to you about permanent residency because it's a little important. As a permanent resident, you're required to obey all laws of the United States, the states, and the localities. You're required to file your income tax returns and report your income to the IRS. You're expected to support the democratic form of government and not to change the government through illegal means. You're required, if you're a male, to register with the Selective Service between the ages of 18 and 25. So there isn't a terrible disadvantage by not having them earn citizenship and to have them be protected by permanent residency. The only item that they would not be allowed to do would be to vote. And I truly think that we need to differentiate between legal immigration and illegal immigration, and this is one way that that could be done. So I think we need to quit that aggressive push to court them as future voters and really instead court them as upstanding citizens and treat them as people instead of votes. I think it would mean a lot to them and it would mean a lot to the country. Well, the children that they've had in the United States, their kids are citizens. If those people are permanent residents and they have children in the United States, and you can argue all day long until the Supreme Court overturns that, they are considered citizens. And, if you want to change all that kind of stuff, that's another thing. But I don't see a problem with it. I mean, if I came over here at 16 and I've gone to school and I've gone to college, I have a good job, I marry, I have children here, I don't have any connection with my other country. What's wrong with my kids being an American citizen? You're not going to stop trying to fight old battles. We've got a big current one right now. So if you going forward, you want to change some of that stuff, perfect. But right now, we've got what we got. I want to get back to security today because reports indicate that individuals, and I've got to go back here to my little blimp because I like that blimp. Reports indicate that individuals illegally crossing have decreased. But that's the only good news that we've got. The cartels have found gold in this easily manufactured painkiller fentanyl, and it's coming into the U.S. from all directions, a lot from our southern border. The Rio Grande Valley sector in Texas, marijuana seizures are down, but cocaine and heroin have increased over 170%. This is the last 3 months. And many are saying that this should be called a heroin and fentanyl crisis, not an opioid. And the MS-13 members, those arrests are up 212%. And remember El Salvador? Blah, 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 all that stuff. And that's just during the last quarter of 2017. So if you don't think that our southern border needs some really increased, better enforced security on the border, I don't know what you've been listening to, but we do have a problem. And it's not mostly looking at mothers and fathers coming over with their kids. It's looking, how do you keep the drugs out? How do you keep the gang members out? That type of thing. So let's move on to explaining chain migration. Not a long video. It's pretty darn interesting. But when you really understand this chain migration thing, it is actually skewing our immigration numbers and making it very difficult for people that should qualify to come in the country legally to really even get here.
Every year, the United States admits more than 1 million new immigrants. What most people don't realize is that the majority of the new immigrants we take in are coming not because of any special jobs or skills, but because they were sponsored by relatives who came earlier. Our current law allows people to sponsor not only spouses, but parents, grandchildren, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, the in-laws even. It all adds up. In 2015, 500,000 people got green cards through the chain migration categories. This has a multiplier effect. Every new immigrant that we admit sponsors an average of 3 more immigrants through chain migration. Trimming chain migration is an important way that we could modernize our immigration system so that we will be emphasizing skills and education and self-sufficiency over family relationships.
So I think you saw that there are 3.45% more people per each person that we allow in legally. So it really starts skewing the numbers totally. And I think when they do this chain migration thing, they really should restrict it to spouses and dependent children, and that's it. None of this other kind of stuff, you know, not huge families. And then what we've got are the stupidest visa program in the entire world. I mean, I couldn't even believe this thing existed.
One of the ways the RAISE Act streamlines the federal immigration program is that it gets rid of the diversity visa lottery that gives green cards to 50,000 random people from around the world every year. So why get rid of it? 3 reasons. 1, it doesn't even diversify the immigration flow, which was the whole point. In 2015, the top 10 countries made up most of the new legal immigrants from that year, and it's been that way for years. If you want to make sure a handful of countries don't monopolize the immigration flow, this is not the way to do it. 2 is low standards. All you have to show is that you have a high school diploma and 2 years of work experience to qualify for the lottery. With millions of people around the world wanting to come here, shouldn't we be a little choosier? And 3 is fraud. Anyone can apply for this lottery. Almost 15 million people did last year, and you only have to show that you qualify if you win. So when the winning announcements go out, there's this mad rush for fake documents. In fact, a few years back, the State Department found that 80% of people from Nigeria who won the lottery had to be turned down because of fraud. It's time to retire the visa lottery.
Pretty crazy. I mean, it's got to be, like I said, the stupidest visa program that you could ever have thought of. So what it amounts to is up to about 55,000 lucky lottery winners secure a permanent visa, permanent residence visa. We talked about how great permanent residency is. And through, it just seems to put them on a pathway to U.S. citizenship. And it just is crazy. And then the other thing that happens is that these winners, it allows their spouses and their children to come along with them also. So it's not just that one person won the lottery, it's that their 10 children and their 3 wives, etc., get to come over here too. So it's just one of those things that needs to stop. I mean, it just is a program that I could not even figure out who thought of it. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's a crazy way to handle immigration. We sort of talked about that, just arguing with Jeff here. That is an interpretation that is disputed, whether it's constitutional or not constitutional. I think it needs to be determined by the Supreme Court, or I'll get to that in just a second here, just to give you an example on El Salvador. Because I keep finishing this presentation and then new things keep happening. I mean, it's just crazy. So all of a sudden we hear about temporary protected status. All heard about that this week. Now actually we heard about it last fall, but we didn't pay a lot of attention to it because we heard about it when the Haitian temporary protected status was basically taken away. So we've heard about the 200,000 El Salvadorans, and I hadn't really heard much about this whole thing until this week. So I want you to notice that part I put in green, who are unable to return home safely due to conditions, etc. These people were already in the United States when the disaster of whatever it was happened. It's not that a disaster happened and they're refugees, it's that they were already here. Many of them illegally, but they were still here. So people here under this temporary protective status were already here in the country, and because of a temporary situation in the country of residence, they were granted this protection. And, from what I've read, they could have been here illegally, but they can apply to get this kind of status. Now, a country is designated by the Department of Homeland Security for different conditions. So it could be an armed conflict, it could be an environmental disaster, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions. So remember the word temporary. And it is the Department of Homeland Security that makes this designation. These countries right now are eligible for this temporary protected status. El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Once granted that designation, an individual cannot be detained by DHS on the basis of their immigration status in the United States. So it's sort of cool if you were here and something happened in your country and all of a sudden you get protected. So TPS is a temporary benefit. It does not lead to lawful permanent resident status or give any other immigration status. But it does not prevent a person from applying for non-immigrant status, filing for an adjustment of status based on a petition, or applying for any other immigration benefit they feel they might be eligible for. So the initial length of stay under TPS is not less than 6 months, but not more than 18 months. So you might want to wonder how come the El Salvadorans can be here for 16, 17 years, right? DHS can extend this time period if conditions in the country warrant it. And these TPS residents are not eligible for green cards, but might later qualify due to marriage to a U.S. citizen, a job offer, a grant of asylum, or sponsorship by a U.S. employer, or most likely being the parent of a child that was born here. So right now, the Nicaraguans and Haitians lost their protection. The Nicaraguans have 14 months to what they call regularize their legal status, and the Haitians have 18 months. And the Secretary of State, so it's not the President, but it was Rex Tillerson, is required by law to assess if TPS protection is justified or not. So right now, we have an estimated 200,000 El Salvadorans in the country. They have birthed, Judy, approximately 197,000 U.S. citizens in their almost 17 years here. So birth citizenship, which is controversial, there's 197 El Salvadoran kids that were born to El Salvadorans who are considered U.S. citizens. Same kind of difference. Their families back home are depending on this money. And since El Salvador grows, grows at about 2%, and it's figured that the amount of money the people are sending back to El Salvador is about 2%, El Salvador is absolutely, they don't like this a bit. The largest group, obviously, is El Salvadorans, followed by the South Sudanese, and then Honduras. The majority of the El Salvadoran TPS holders live in Washington, D.C., 32,360, Los Angeles, 30,400, and New York, 23,168. Decisions. Tillerson is going to have to make decisions on the temporary protected status on Syria, Nepal, Honduras, Yemen, and Somalia this year. So to me, what I'm seeing is the Trump's administration of drawing attention to another area of our immigration law that's been loosely followed and needs addressing. There's no reason to allow people on a temporary protected status because of an earthquake that happened in 2001 to continually renew it and have them here 16, 17 years. Those people have established themselves, they have lives here, they have homes here, they have jobs here, and I mean, to me it was a very cruel thing to be doing. So we elected Trump, and one of the reasons was to address our sloppy immigration laws, and to me, he's doing it. People don't like it, but it's sure happening. Getting back a little bit that you heard on the video, the Constitution does grant the power to shape the nation's immigration laws to the legislative branch, not the president. Obama had no right to do what he did with DACA. He certainly had a right to go to Congress and say, you have got to come to me with legislation that fixes this situation. That's what Trump's done. Trump's done the same thing with TPS. And it's not up to the president, it is up to the Congress. And it really boils down, do we want our laws enforced or to continue to kick this can down the road? We kick the budget can down the road, we kick the immigration can down the road, and there's probably 49,000 other cans that we're shooting down the road. So we definitely need to reform our immigration system. You know, the DACA situation got put off by this latest judge's ruling, so the March isn't the deadline. But overall immigration reform has got to be addressed. It's got to be well thought out. We've got to look at everything that hasn't worked and figure out what we're going to do to implement it to make it work. So to me, the Democratic Party really lost the war of ideas a few decades ago, and they really are dependent on immigrant voters to survive. And they want these folks in, and they want them with full rights and full benefits. And I do feel that we need to stand strong on no citizenship, and we've got to understand that our 2018 elections are so very important. It's just not another off-year election. This thing is really, really critical. The Republicans, to my way of thinking it, must increase their majorities in both the House and Senate and get rid of the Republicans that really, I mean, look at our Gang of Eight. Look at the Dreamer Act. Look at the things that they were trying to propose. Those were not what we need as a country. So immigration's huge. Hope you understand a little bit more about DACA and the Dreamers and the whole immigration mess that we're in. But it's a serious situation, and if we want the country to be the United States of America and attract people that are going to benefit our country, we need to really address this. And other countries do. There's no reason that we can't. So that was the end of my presentation. And I put open mic till the very end. Gary has a mic. And if any of you have anything to say or things, come on up and chatter away, and it's a good thing.
But few of you know that this has been a subject of concern to me that I've spoken on numerous times, and as the past chair of the platform committee, it was addressed but not voted on. But one of the members of the platform committee was a farmer in this area, an elderly gentleman, and we had some discussions on that, and we went back. I know people in this area from 45 years ago that were in high school that did farm work legally, and it was very common for these young high school kids to go out and do the heavy work of getting the weed on the trucks, etc. They can't do that anymore.
Can't do that anymore.
It's illegal.
Might hurt those kids.
And it's about the mid-'80s when you started to see the expansion of the welfare state into all sorts of areas that went hand in hand. In California, a state that has produced 2 Republican presidents in our lifetime and had you used to have at least 1 Republican senator, is now permanently Democrat. So we could use one of those 2 Senate seats. It was taken over by illegal immigration in the state of California. If we don't stop it, it will be irreversibly changed. And I would like to say I'm a naturalized citizen, and I'll be very proud when we can celebrate the fact that Cecily will become one in the near future.
I don't know. The more I learn about this country, I'm not sure what. No.
But I would also like to see that she has demonstrated the capability of tackling issues like this, and it's too bad we cannot run her for Congress here in this area. I would support her financially in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything that they'd like to ask, add, open mic, anything that's going in the corner? Yeah, I'm not kidding you. This presentation was so funny. I got going on it, and then this happened, and that happened, and all of a sudden we had temporary protective status, and we had this, and we had that. It just kept getting longer and longer.
It's interesting to note that recently ICE raided a anchor baby mill in Irvine, California, and closed it down, where about 400 women were in there waiting to have their babies. And when they were paying about $3,000 a month to stay there, I don't know how they got the money, and then they would go to a local hospital and have the baby there.
And we'd pay for it.
We pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, no, the anchor baby thing is, I mean, so many people have taken advantage of that situation. Like you say, they pay big money to get here, to go to one of those facilities, to wait it out until they have their baby, deliver it, and then, oh, they have an American citizen baby, now I get to stay. It's not good.
Well, I have first-hand knowledge of the Chinese situation. They're not so much for immediate. If you know China, what they do is long-range planning, centuries. They have established in every major city in the United States large apartment complexes, as the one he spoke about. They have the baby, they return home. That child then comes back, goes to school, college, and then becomes a voting citizen in this country. Their goal is to outvote us and to obtain our country in the long run.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy situation, and I think the anchor baby thing needs to be defined and done away with. Anyone else? Rusty.
Thank you. I received in my email within the last 2 or 3 days from the NRA that we've got some legislative issues going on in the state of Washington that they're requesting some recognition and some support on. And unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me. But if you are a member of the NRA, or if you aren't, and you're interested in saving some of the Second Amendment rights that we have, then I suggest that you research that and look into it. I believe there's a rally this weekend or next weekend in Olympia regarding that. And I don't have a date. Does any other NRA member know what it is?
It is beginning, I think it's next Monday.
Is it? Okay. Anyway.
Okay,
just
thank
another
you.
one of those.
So anyway, guys, there's extras of these around. So if you didn't get one yourselves, come, pick them up. You'll see them lying on the tables, things that way. It is extremely important for you to communicate with your senator and your legislators about what's going on in Olympia. And there's gun bills, there's some of the other silly things that I read to you about. You just really need to keep plugged in, and you need, it's sort of, I know the Mays in the back table had to leave earlier, but Matt Shea's Facebook page is an excellent page to look at to sort of see what's being brought up, and then you can write to whether it's in the 9th or the 7th or the 6th or the 4th, but you need to be writing. Jeff?
I was looking at a bill that has to do with the court being able to decide to allow relatives, including second cousins, to have the right to access to children visitation. And I believe that the state has no business in any of that. And so I went and I looked at who sponsored it, and Bob McCaslin Jr. was on the list of co-sponsors. And so I contacted him, along with Matt and Mike, and stated how I feel about this, and Bob McCaslin got back to me and said, I'm going to vote against it. So he went from appearing on the co-sponsor list to being against the bill. I don't know who else talked to him, but you never know what kind of impact you might make. So.
Yeah, you've got to have your voices heard, guys. You really do. You do make a difference. That's it. We're done. Thank you, guys.